Hello students, in today's module we will be describing about the theories of personality, especially from a psychoanalytic perspective. The objective of this module is to help us understand how a personality is formed from psychoanalytic perspective. The second objective, to understand the Freudian concepts of layers of mind and components of personality. Dear students, by now you might have understood the definition of personality, nature of personality and factors that determine the development of personality. Different theories explained how a personality of an individual is formed from different perspectives. The most prominent theory, most of you are aware, is psychoanalytic theory, followed by behavioristic and humanistic theories. Freud's theory emphasized on the role of childhood experiences and unconscious mind, while behaviorists focused on the environmental factors, role of reinforcement in the development of personality. On the other hand, humanistic theorists believed that every human being or every individual has the potential and they can exercise their choice, will and freedom for the optimum development of their own personality. Later on, different theorists came forward with their own concepts. For example, trait theorists postulated that personality can be described in an array of characteristics, like which are the common traits, which are the unique traits in the individual. Similarly, what are the source traits, what are the surface traits in an individual, which will help us to understand the personality of an individual. Next category of theories are type theories. They emphasized that individual's personality can be described in different types. Suppose if I ask you, how will you describe your personality? For example, I may ask you, are you an introvert or extrovert? So you know based upon your behavior whether you are an introvert or extrovert. Or if we have to classify people in terms of Indian terms, generally we speak about personality in terms of gunas. You know what are gunas? Rajasic, Tamasic and Sattvic. Though all of us have all these three gunas, one individual will have a prominence of one particular type. So, some people might be very high on Rajasic, some people might be very high on Tamasic, some people might be low on Sattvic. So, it all depends upon what sort of personality that you have. Similarly, type theories also classify people in terms of external locus of control or internal locus of control. On the other hand, Eysenck, another theorist who did a lot of extensive research on the personality of the human beings, he postulated that personality cannot be described in terms of only traits or type, but personality is a combination of both types and traits. Of recent, new theorists tried to explain from their research that human personality can be described in terms of factors also. So, in the coming modules, you will be learning all these different theories, but today we will be focusing on understanding personality from a Freud's psychoanalytic perspective. You all might have been familiar with the name Sigmund Freud. As a student of psychology, you should be familiar, and even otherwise, if you are from a literature background, you might have heard about the writings of Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is the founder of psychoanalysis. This psychoanalysis is a method for treating mental illness, and this psychoanalytic perspective can also be considered as a theory which explains human behavior. He proposed the first complete theory of personality. Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality argues that human behavior is the result of the interactions among three component parts of the mind: the id, ego and superego. This theory, known as Freud's structural theory of personality, places great emphasis on the role of unconscious psychological conflicts in shaping behavior and also the personality. Dynamic interactions among these fundamental parts of the mind are thought to progress through 5 distinct psychosexual stages of development. Over the last century, however, Freud's ideas have since been met with a lot of criticism, partly because due to his singular focus on sexuality as the main driver of human personality development. We can understand Freud's psychoanalytic perspective based upon the case of Anna O. This particular client's real name is Bertha Peppenheim. This case marked a very turning point in the career of a young Viennese neuropathologist by name Sigmund Freud. It even went on to influence the future direction of psychology as a whole. Anna O suffered from hysteria, a condition in which the patient exhibits physical symptoms like paralysis, convulsions, hallucinations, loss of speech. But if you observe the patient, there will not be any apparent physical cause. So, her doctor Joseph Breuer succeeded in treating Anna by helping her to recall forgotten memories of traumatic events. During discussions with her, it became very clear that she had developed a fear of drinking when a dog whom she hated drank from her glass. Her other symptoms originated when caring for her sick father. However, Anna never expressed her anxiety for her illness, but later on she expressed it during psychoanalysis. As soon as she had the opportunity to make these unconscious thoughts conscious, they found her paralysis disappeared. So, did you understand here? Whatever unconscious content was brought to the conscious through this approach, all her symptoms have been disappearing. Breuer discussed the case with his friend Freud. Out of these discussions came the germ of an idea that Freud was to pursue for the rest of his life. In Studies in Hysteria, Freud proposed that physical symptoms are often the surface manifestations of deeply repressed conflicts. However, Freud was not just advancing an explanation of a particular illness. Implicitly, he was proposing a revolutionary new theory of the human psyche itself. This theory emerged bit by bit as a result of Freud's clinical investigations, and it led him to propose that there were at least 3 levels of the mind. So, let us understand now what are those levels or layers of the mind which Freud postulated. Freud developed a topographical model of the mind whereby he described the features of the mind's structure and function. Freud used the analogy of an iceberg to describe the 3 levels of the mind. Dear students, hope you have understood the significance of the layers of the mind given by the Sigmund Freud. So, once again, to make it clear, on the surface is the consciousness, which consists of those thoughts that are the focus of our attention immediately now, and this is seen at the tip of the iceberg. The preconscious consists of all the information which you can be retrieving from the memory. The third and most significant region is the unconscious. Here lie the processes that are the real cause of our most behavior. Like an iceberg, the most important part of the mind is the part which you cannot see. So, this unconscious mind acts as a repository, a cauldron of primitive wishes and impulses kept at bay and mediated by the preconscious area. Freud believed that events in our childhood have a great influence on our adult lives, shaping our personality. Thus, when we explain our behavior to ourselves or others, that is a conscious mental activity, we rarely give a true account of our motivation, because we want to impress upon others. So, we give only that information which is impressed by the others. This is not because we are deliberately lying. While human beings are great deceivers of others, they are even more adept at self-deception. So, we want to please ourselves. So, we want to take only the pleasant information and repress the unnecessary, unpleasant information. Freud's work is dominated by the attempts to find ways of penetrating this often subtle and elaborate camouflage that obscures the hidden structure and processes of personality. For example, Freud found that some events and desires were often too frightening or painful for his patients to acknowledge them, to accept them, and believed such information was locked away in the unconscious mind. This can happen through the process known as repression. We will discuss about the repression at a later stage in detail. Sigmund Freud emphasized the importance of unconscious mind, and a primary assumption of Freudian's theory is that the unconscious mind governs behavior to a greater degree than people think. Indeed, the goal of psychoanalysis is to make the unconscious conscious. So, hope you have understood what from the layers of the mind that unconscious plays an important role, and the main objective of this theory is, in order to make the people develop a proper personality, we have to make the content of the unconscious mind conscious. Now, let us understand the structure of personality as explained by Sigmund Freud. According to Sigmund Freud, human personality is very complex as it has more than a single component. In his famous psychoanalytic theory, Freud states that personality is composed of three elements known as id, ego and superego. All these three together Freud called the psychic apparatus. These are not physical areas within the brain, but rather hypothetical conceptualizations of important mental functions. If you want to understand, or if you want to see from the brain whether id, ego and superego are there, you cannot locate them. But from the activities of the mind, you can understand whether the id is functioning, whether the ego is functioning or the superego is functioning. Now, let us understand these three components in detail. Id, ego and superego are conceptualized as three essential parts of the human personality. These elements work together to create complex human behaviors. Each component adds its own unique contribution to personality, and the three interact in ways that have a powerful influence on an individual. Each element of personality emerges at different points in life. According to Freud's theory, certain aspects of our personality are more primal and might pressure us to act upon our most basic urges. Other parts of our personality work to counteract these urges and strive to make us conform to the demands of reality. Now we will see how the id functions. According to Freud, the id is the source of all psychic energy, making it the primary component of personality. In fact, the id is the only component of personality that is present from birth. This aspect of personality is entirely unconscious and includes instinctive and primitive behaviors. How do you think the id will be operating? The id is driven by the pleasure principle, which strives for immediate gratification of all desires, wants and needs. If these needs are not satisfied immediately, the result is a state of anxiety or tension. For example, an increase in hunger or thirst should produce an immediate attempt to eat or drink. The id is very important early in life because it ensures that an infant's needs are met. If the infant is hungry or uncomfortable, the child will cry until the demands of the id are satisfied. Young infants, just newborn infants, are ruled entirely by the id. There is no reasoning with them when these needs demand satisfaction. Imagine trying to convince a baby to wait until lunchtime to eat their meal. The id requires immediate satisfaction, and because the other components of personality are not yet developed in the infant, immediately the child will cry or grab something to eat to fulfill the hunger. However, immediately fulfilling these needs is not always realistic or even possible. If we were ruled entirely by the pleasure principle, we might find ourselves grabbing the things that we want out of other people's hands in order to satisfy our own cravings. This behavior would be both disruptive and socially unacceptable. So, now let us see about the operation of the pleasure principle from the id. When its needs are not satisfied, the tension is created through the use of primary process thinking, which involves forming a mental image of the desired object as a way of satisfying the need. The id comprises two kinds of biological instincts or drives, which Freud called eros and thanatos. Eros can also be called as a life instinct. This life instinct will help the individual to survive. It also directs life sustaining activities like respiration, eating and sexual drives. The energy created by the life instincts is known as libido. On the other hand, thanatos, which is also known as death instinct, is viewed as a set of destructive forces present in all human beings. When this energy is directed outward onto others, it is expressed as aggression and violence. Freud believed that eros or life instinct is much stronger than thanatos. That is the reason people are able to survive rather than self-destruct. Although people eventually learn to control the id, this part of personality remains the same infantile primal force throughout the life. It is the development of ego and the superego that allows people to control its basic instincts and act in ways that are both realistic and socially acceptable. So far we have seen how it is an instinctive behavior, how it helps us to immediately satisfy our needs without thinking of the consequences, the logic and the reality. But as we are growing, the id and superego will also be developing in our personality, and they try to balance our behavior by not just focusing only on the immediate gratification of our needs, but also think about the consequences before we act upon. So, now let us see the ego. According to Freud, the ego develops from the id and ensures that the impulses of the id can be expressed in a manner acceptable in the real world. The ego functions in the conscious, preconscious and unconscious mind. The ego is the component of personality that is responsible for dealing with reality. The ego operates based on the reality principle, which strives to satisfy the id's desires in realistic and socially appropriate ways. The reality principle weighs the costs and benefits of an action before deciding to act upon or abandon impulses. In many cases, the id's impulses can be satisfied through a process of delayed gratification. The ego will eventually allow the behavior, but only in the appropriate time and place. Freud compared the id to a horse and the ego to the horse's rider. The horse provides the power and motion, while the rider provides the direction and also the guidance. Without its rider, the horse may go in any direction without a particular goal. That is, it may simply wander wherever it wished and do whatever it pleased. The rider gives the horse directions and commands to get it to go where the rider wants it to go. The ego also discharges tension created by unmet impulses through secondary process thinking. That is, the ego tries to find an object in the real world that matches the mental image created by its primary process. Imagine that you are stuck in a long meeting at work. You find yourself growing increasingly hungry as the meeting drags on. The id might compel you to jump up from your seat, rush to the break room for a snack, but the ego guides you, please sit quietly and wait for the meeting to end. Instead of acting upon the primal urges of the id, you spend the rest of the meeting imagining yourself eating a burger. Once the meeting is over, you can seek out the object you were imagining and satisfy the demands of the id in a realistic and appropriate manner. The last part of the component is the superego. Superego also plays a very essential role in the formation of the personality. According to Freud, the superego begins to emerge around the age of 5 years. It holds the internalized moral standards and ideals which we learned from our parents and society. That is, what is right, what is wrong. The superego also provides guidelines for making judgments. Most importantly, it has two parts: the conscience, which include information about things that are viewed as bad by parents and society. These behaviors are forbidden as they lead to bad consequences, punishments or feelings of guilt and remorse. The second part of superego is ego ideal, which includes rules and standards for behaviors that the ego aspires to. The superego tries to perfect and civilize our behavior. It suppresses all unacceptable urges of it and struggles to make the ego act upon idealistic standards rather than upon realistic principles. The superego is present in the conscious, preconscious and unconscious. You can look at based upon this slide how the id, ego and superego operates. It says immediate gratification, ego says think of the consequences and superego will try to balance all the three. When all the three are functioning in a smooth way, there is a balance in the personality. But sometimes the id wants to be more successful, wants to fulfill its needs, ego also tries to play its role and superego also wants to try to find the balance between id and ego. So, what happens? There might be a conflict, there might be an anxiety, there might be a tension experienced by the individual. So, students, by the end of this module, you have understood the important role played by the Sigmund Freud in the field of psychology in making us understand how the human behavior and the personality are influenced by childhood experiences and how unconscious mind plays a vital role in making the person behave in a pleasant or unpleasant way. We also learnt the content of 3 layers of the mind and how the psychoanalytic theory helps us to make the unconscious conscious so that there will be a peaceful life for the individual. Not only that, you also understood personality can be understood in terms of 3 components: id, which operates on the pleasure principle, ego, which operates on the reality principle, and the superego, which operates on the moral principle. As long as there is harmony among these 3 components, there will be a harmony in the personality of the individual. But if there is an imbalance which originates because of certain situations and the functioning of the components of personality, there will be a disintegration of the personality. In that case, we need to strive in order to create the balance between the components of the personality.